The blood-red sun beat down mercilessly on Theodora, Thea Matthews, as she watched the stagecoach disappear into the dusty horizon, taking with it her last hope of reaching Santa Fe before winter set in. Her fiancé of 3 years hadn't even looked back when he'd tossed her trunk to the ground and declared their engagement over, climbing back aboard with a cruel laugh that still rang in her ears. It was 1875, and at 22 years old, Thea found herself stranded at a remote way station in the New Mexico territory with nothing but her trunk, a small purse containing her life savings, and the bitter taste of betrayal in her mouth. "Miss, you can't stay here," the station master called from the porch of the small outpost. "Next coach ain't due for 2 weeks, and we don't board ladies traveling alone." Thea straightened her shoulders despite the weight pressing down on her chest. Her blue traveling dress was already coated with a fine layer of dust, and sweat trickled down her back beneath her corset. "I understand, sir. Is there a town nearby where I might find accommodation?" The station master spit a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Silver Creek's about 10 miles east, but you ain't gonna make it there on foot, especially not with that trunk." Panic rose in Thea's throat as she glanced at the desolate landscape surrounding her. Miles of scrubby desert stretched in every direction, broken only by distant mesas and scattered juniper trees. The afternoon was waning, and the thought of being caught in this wilderness after dark sent a shiver down her spine despite the heat. "Perhaps someone is heading that way who might offer me passage," she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. The station master shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not, ain't my concern." He turned and disappeared inside, the door slamming behind him. Thea blinked back tears of frustration. Just 3 weeks ago, she'd left her teaching position in Philadelphia, excited to start a new life with Henry in Santa Fe. He'd traveled west 6 months earlier to establish a business, writing passionate letters about their future together. Now she knew those letters had been nothing but lies. The sound of approaching hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see a rider approaching from the west, his silhouette shimmering in the heat waves rising from the hard, packed earth. As he drew closer, she could make out a tall man astride a magnificent chestnut stallion. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who belonged to this harsh land. The rider slowed as he approached the station, and Thea's breath caught in her throat. Beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, she glimpsed a strong jawline dusted with stubble and eyes the color of a summer storm. He couldn't have been more than 30, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years under the unforgiving western sun. He tipped his hat in greeting. "Afternoon, madam." "Good afternoon," Thea replied, trying to maintain her composure despite her dire circumstances. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. He led his horse to the water trough, studying her with a curious expression. "Seems you've been left behind," he observed, his voice deep and tinged with a slight drawl. Thea felt heat rise to her cheeks, partly from embarrassment and partly from indignation. "I was unexpectedly separated from my travel companion." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "That's a gentle way of putting it. I saw that stagecoach tear out of here like the devil himself was chassing it. Watched a man throw your trunk down like it was full of rattlesnakes." Thea's embarrassment deepened. "You saw that from up on the ridge yonder." He nodded toward the hills to the west. "Owen Blackwood at your service." He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Theodora Matthews," she replied, offering a slight curtsy out of habit. "Miss Matthews." "Where you headed, Miss Matthews?" "Silver Creek, I suppose. The station master says it's the nearest town." Owen glanced at her trunk, then back at her face. That's a fair piece to walk, especially for a lady. He studied her for a moment longer, as if weighing a decision. I'm headed that way myself. I could take you if you'd like. Relief surged through Thea, quickly followed by caution. Her mother had raised her to be wary of strangers, particularly men, and especially in uncivilized territories like this. That's very kind, Mr. Blackwood, but I wouldn't want to impose. Owen chuckled, a warm sound that somehow eased her tension. No imposition, madam. Can't rightly leave you stranded here with night common on. Ain't safe, and it wouldn't sit right with me. He moved toward the station master's door, rapping his knuckles against the wood. When the station master appeared, Owen exchanged a few words with him, too low for Thea to hear. The station master nodded, then cast a glance in her direction before retreating inside once more. Owen returned to her side. Just askin' about you. Mackin' sure I got the story straight. And did you? Thea asked, lifting her chin slightly. Seems your fiancé decided to continue his journey without you. Man said something about another woman waitin' in Santa Fe. Owen's expression softened at the pain that flashed across her face. I'm sorry, Miss Matthews. That's a cruel hand to be dealt. Thea swallowed hard. Yes, well. It appears I've had a fortunate escape from a most unsuitable match. Owen smiled at that, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. That's a mighty fine way to look at it. He gestured to her trunk. If you'll allow me to secure your belongings, we can be on our way. Should reach Silver Creek before sundown if we make good time. Thea hesitated only a moment before nodding. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I accept your kind offer. Owen lifted her trunk with surprising ease, securing it behind his saddle with leather straps. Call me Owen, he said, turning back to her. Formalities don't mean much out here. He offered his hand to help her mount, and Thea took it, noticing the calluses that spoke of a life of hard work. With a grace she didn't know she possessed, she settled herself sideways on the saddle, arranging her skirts as modestly as possible. Owen swung up behind her, his chest warm against her back. You comfortable, Miss Matthews? Yes, thank you, she replied, though comfort was far from what she felt with a strange man's arms encircling her to hold the reins. Yet there was something reassuring about his presence, a steadiness that calmed her frayed nerves. Then let's get you to Silver Creek, he said, clicking to his horse. As they set off down the dusty trail, Thea couldn't help but wonder what new surprises awaited her in this wild territory, and why fate had seen fit to place her in the care of this intriguing stranger. The rhythmic gait of the horse beneath them lulled Thea into a contemplative silence as they made their way across the rugged landscape. The terrain was unlike anything she'd experienced in Philadelphia, vast, open, and seemingly endless. Sagebrush and yucca dotted the arid soil, while in the distance, red rock formations towered against the cloudless blue sky. First time in the territory? Owen asked, breaking the silence. Is it that obvious? Thea replied, a small smile playing on her lips despite her circumstances. You've got that look about you, like everything's new and a bit frightening. I find it beautiful, actually, she admitted. Harsh but beautiful in its own way. Owen nodded, though she couldn't see it. That it is. Takes a special kind of person to see beauty in this land. Most newcomers just see the danger. Oh, I see that too, Thea assured him. I'm not completely naive, Mr. Blackwood. Owen, she corrected herself. Never said you were, Miss Matthews, just that you've got good eyes. There was appreciation in his voice. What brought you out west, if you don't mind my asking? Besides your former fiancé, that is. Thea considered the question. A desire for change, I suppose. I was a school teacher in Philadelphia, but the city began to feel confining. When Henry, my former fiancé, proposed we start a new life in Santa Fe, It seemed like providence. "Teaching's honorable work," Owen commented. "We need more educated folks out here, especially those willing to teach the young ones." "You have children, Mr. Blackwood?" Thea asked before she could stop herself. It was a forward question for a recent acquaintance. A soft chuckle rumbled through his chest. "No, madam. Never been married. Haven't found a woman willing to put up with my particular brand of stubbornness." Thea found herself smiling at his candor. "And what brings you to this part of the territory? Are you a rancher?" "Among other things," he replied cryptically. "I've got a modest spread outside Silver Creek. Raise horses mostly, some cattle. Do a bit of guide work for the army when they need someone who knows the land." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon. The air was cooling slightly, bringing relief from the oppressive heat of the day. "May I ask you something, Owen?" Thea ventured after some time had passed. "You may." "Why did you stop to help me? You could have ridden past." Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. "Where I come from, you don't leave folks stranded, especially not a lady. Out here, looking after one another isn't just being neighborly, it's survival." "Where are you from originally?" Thea asked, finding herself genuinely curious about this man who had appeared when she needed help most. "Virginia, originally. Left after the war. Needed a fresh start somewhere that didn't hold so many ghosts." The weight of unspoken history hung in his words, and Thea didn't press further. The war had left scars on everyone, some more visible than others. "I'm grateful for your assistance," she said simply. "I don't know what I would have done otherwise. You strike me as resourceful, Miss Matthews. I reckon you'd have found a way." His confidence in her abilities, despite having just met her, warmed something inside Thea that had gone cold when Henry abandoned her. As they crested a small rise, Owen pointed ahead. "There's Silver Creek. Not much to look at, but it's got what you need: boarding house, general store, even a small school." Thea's eyes widened at the mention of a school. Perhaps fate had not been as cruel as she'd initially thought. Silver Creek was indeed a modest settlement, a single main street lined with wooden buildings, some adorned with false fronts in an attempt at grandeur. A church steeple rose above the other structures, and horses were hitched outside what appeared to be a saloon. It wasn't Santa Fe, but it looked civilized enough. "We'll get you settled at Mrs. Porter's boarding house," Owen said as they approached the town. "She's a good woman, runs a respectable place, no rough characters allowed." "You seem to know everyone," Thea observed. "It's a small town." "Hard not to." As they rode down the main street, Thea felt the curious stares of the townspeople. A woman riding with a man who wasn't her husband or relative was bound to raise eyebrows, even in the less formal Western territories. Owen seemed unfazed by the attention, guiding his horse directly to a 2-story white clapboard house with a neat picket fence and flower boxes in the windows. A wooden sign hanging from the porch proclaimed it: "Porter's Boarding House, clean rooms, good food, Christian values." Before Owen could dismount, the front door swung open, and a plump woman with silver-streaked dark hair emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Owen Blackwood, as I live and breathe. Didn't expect to see you in town this week." Her gaze shifted to Thea, curiosity evident in her kind eyes. "And who might this young lady be?" Owen helped Thea down from the horse before answering. "Mrs. Porter, this is Miss Theodora Matthews." She found herself stranded at the stage station when her traveling companion decided to continue on without her. "I offered her transport to town." Mrs. Porter's expression softened with sympathy. "You poor dear, come inside at once. You must be exhausted." She shot Owen an approving look. "Good of you to bring her here, Owen." "Wouldn't have left her there," he replied, untying Thea's trunk from his saddle. Miss Matthews is looking for accommodation, at least temporarily. Of course, of course. I've got a lovely room available, faces the morning sun. Mrs. Porter turned to Thea. It's $3 a week, meals included. I run a respectable establishment, no gentlemen callers in private rooms, and curfew is 9 o'clock sharp. That sounds perfect, Mrs. Porter, Thea said gratefully. I can pay for 2 weeks in advance. Let's get you settled then, Mrs. Porter gestured toward the door. Owen carried Thea's trunk up the steps and into the foyer of the boarding house. The interior was simple but immaculately clean, with polished wooden floors and modest furnishings. The scent of fresh bread and something savory filled the air, reminding Thea that she hadn't eaten since morning. Second floor, first door on the right, Mrs. Porter directed. I'll show Miss Matthews up. Owen nodded, carrying the trunk upstairs with ease. He set it down in a small but pleasant room furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, a chest of drawers, and a rocking chair by the window. Thank you, Owen, Thea said, suddenly feeling awkward now that their journey was over. For everything. He replaced his hat, which he'd removed upon entering the house. My pleasure, Miss Matthews. He hesitated, then added, if you need anything while you're getting settled, you can find me at the Mercantile most mornings, or send word to my ranch Blackwoods, everyone knows it. I will, Thea promised, though she wasn't sure if she would have reason to seek him out again. Owen tipped his hat to both women and turned to leave. Wait, Thea called impulsively. I never asked what I owe you for the transportation. Owen paused in the doorway, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Nothing, Miss Matthews. Consider it a welcome to Silver Creek. With that he descended the stairs, his spurs jingling softly with each step. Thea moved to the window and watched as he mounted his horse and rode away, his straight-backed figure becoming smaller as he headed back down the main street. That's a good man, Mrs. Porter said, coming to stand beside her. One of the best in these parts, though he keeps to himself mostly. Thea turned from the window. He was very kind to help me, Mrs. Porter nodded knowingly. Owen Blackwood doesn't do anything by halves. If he offers help, it's genuine. She patted Thea's arm. Now you must be hungry. Supper's at 6, but I can bring you up a plate of cold chicken and some bread if you'd like to rest first. That would be wonderful, thank you. Left alone, Thea sank onto the edge of the bed, the events of the day washing over her in a wave of exhaustion. Henry's betrayal, being stranded, and then rescued by a stranger, it was more adventure than she'd experienced in all her years in Philadelphia. As she unpacked her trunk, setting her modest collection of dresses in the chest of drawers, Thea found herself wondering about the mysterious Owen Blackwood, and why a man who seemed so decent remained unmarried in a territory where eligible men outnumbered women significantly. Perhaps, she thought as she changed into a fresh dress for supper, their paths would cross again, and she might learn more about her rescuer. For now, though, she needed to focus on establishing herself in Silver Creek and determining what her future might hold in this unfamiliar land. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the curtains of Thea's room. She'd slept surprisingly well, exhaustion overcoming the strangeness of her new surroundings. After dressing in a simple green day dress and pinning her honey-brown hair into a modest chignon, she made her way downstairs to breakfast. The dining room held a long oak table where several other boarders were already seated. Mrs. Porter bustled in from the kitchen carrying a platter of flapjacks. Good morning, Miss Matthews. Come, sit. Everyone, this is our newest resident, Miss Theodora Matthews from Philadelphia. The other boarders, two older gentlemen who introduced themselves as Mr. Jenkins, the town's barber, and Mr. Williams, a land surveyor, along with a middle-aged widow named Mrs. Cosgrove, greeted her warmly. "What brings you to Silver Creek, Miss Matthews?" Mrs. Cosgrove asked as she passed the plate of bacon. Thea hesitated, uncertain how much of her situation to reveal. "I was originally traveling to Santa Fe, but my plans changed unexpectedly. Owen Blackwood brought her in yesterday," Mrs. Porter supplied, setting a cup of coffee in front of Thea. "Found her stranded at the stage station." "Blackwood, eh?" Mr. Jenkins nodded approvingly. "Good man. Saved my grandson when he got lost in the hills last winter. Tracked him for 2 days in the snow. He breeds the finest horses in the territory," Mr. Williams added. "Army buys most of his stock." Mrs. Cosgrove leaned closer to Thea. "And he's quite handsome, isn't he?" "Such a shame he keeps to himself so much." "Martha," Mrs. Porter scolded lightly, "don't go filling the girl's head with notions. She's only just arrived." Thea felt her cheeks warm. "I'm not looking for. That is, I've recently ended an engagement. I'm more concerned with finding employment than anything else." Mrs. Porter brightened at this. "What sort of work are you looking for, dear?" "I was a teacher in Philadelphia. I'd hoped to find similar employment." The table fell silent, exchanged glances passing between the boarders. "Well now," Mr. Jenkins said finally, "that's a bit of providence. Our schoolteacher, Miss Hargrove, announced just last week that she's marrying a rancher from Arizona Territory. She leaves at the end of the month." Thea's heart leaped. "Is the position open then?" Mrs. Porter nodded. "Mayor Thornton handles school matters. His office is next to the bank. You should speak with him today." After breakfast, Thea thanked Mrs. Porter for the information and set out to explore Silver Creek. The town was larger than it had appeared upon her arrival, with several side streets branching off the main thoroughfare. She counted a general store, a blacksmith shop, a small bank, the saloon, a doctor's office, a millinery, and various other establishments necessary for a functioning community. The schoolhouse stood at the end of a side street, a simple one-room building with a bell tower. As Thea approached, she heard children's voices reciting multiplication tables. Peering through the window, she saw about 20 students of varying ages seated on benches, with a stern-looking woman pointing at a slate board. Reluctant to interrupt the lesson, Thea continued to the mayor's office. Mayor Thornton proved to be a jovial man in his 50s with impressive side whiskers and an expansive manner. "A teacher from Philadelphia," he exclaimed when she stated her business. "How fortuitous! We've been wondering who would replace Miss Hargrove. Our children deserve a proper education, even out here in the territories." "I would be delighted to apply for the position," Thea said. "Apply? My dear young lady, consider yourself hired. We can't afford to be choosy. The salary is $40 a month, plus housing. There's a small cottage behind the schoolhouse for the teacher's use." Thea blinked, surprised by the swift offer and the generous terms. In Philadelphia, she'd earned only $30 monthly and had to board with a family. "That's very generous, Mayor Thornton. We value education here in Silver Creek, Miss Matthews. When can you start?" "Miss Hargrove leaves on the 15th. I can start immediately if you'd like me to observe her methods before taking over." The mayor beamed. "Excellent. I'll introduce you to Miss Hargrove this afternoon after school lets out. Oh, and we'll need to have a small reception to introduce you to the parents. Perhaps Sunday after church." "That would be lovely," Thea agreed, still somewhat dazed by how quickly her fortunes had turned. Leaving the mayor's office with a promise to return at 3 o'clock, Thea decided to visit the general store to purchase a few necessities. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and she was immediately enveloped in the familiar scents of coffee, leather, and spices that seemed universal to general stores everywhere. "Be right with you," called a voice from the back. Thea browsed the shelves, marveling at the variety of goods available in such a remote location. She was examining a jar of honey when the shopkeeper emerged from the storeroom. "Owen!" she exclaimed in surprise. Owen Blackwood looked equally startled to see her, though pleasure quickly replaced his surprise. "Miss Matthews, good morning. I see you're exploring our little town." "Yes, and with great success. I've just been hired as the new school teacher," she said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "Is that so?" His smile widened, genuine warmth in his gray eyes. "Congratulations. The children here could use someone with proper Eastern education." "You work here as well as manage your ranch?" Thea asked, gesturing around the store. Owen shook his head. "No, I'm just helping out. The owner, Mr. Goodwin, is laid up with gout. I deliver supplies from the railroad twice a month, so I'm familiar with his inventory." "That's very neighborly of you. Like I said yesterday, out here we look after each other." He leaned against the counter. "What can I help you with today?" Thea gathered the items she needed: stationery, hairpins, a small sewing kit, and a bottle of rose water. As Owen tallied her purchases, the door opened again, admitting a well-dressed woman perhaps a few years older than Thea, with striking auburn hair and a confident bearing. "Owen Blackwood, you promised to have my order ready 2 days ago," the woman said, though her tone was more teasing than truly irritated. "And it's been waiting for you, Vivian," Owen replied easily. "I'll fetch it as soon as I've finished with Miss Matthews here." He turned to Thea. "Miss Matthews, may I introduce Miss Vivian Crawford, daughter of the bank president. Vivian, this is Miss Theodora Matthews, newly arrived from Philadelphia and our town's next schoolteacher." Vivian's green eyes assessed Thea with undisguised curiosity. "A pleasure, Miss Matthews." "Philadelphia, you say? However did you end up in our little corner of nowhere?" Something in her tone made Thea straighten her spine. "Fate has a way of leading us where we're meant to be, Miss Crawford. I'm finding Silver Creek quite charming." "Indeed?" Vivian raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Well, it's certainly not Philadelphia, but we managed to keep ourselves entertained." She turned her attention back to Owen. "I'll wait for my package, Owen. Father's expecting these ledgers." Owen nodded and finished wrapping Thea's purchases in brown paper. "That'll be $1.15, Miss Matthews." Thea counted out the money, acutely aware of Vivian's scrutiny. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. It was a pleasure to see you again." "Likewise," he replied, his eyes lingering on hers a moment longer than strictly necessary. "I'm glad to hear you've found employment so quickly. Silver Creek is fortunate to have you." As Thea left the store, she heard Vivian's voice, pitched low but still audible. My, Owen, you certainly rushed to the rescue of a pretty face." Thea didn't hear Owen's response, but found herself hoping it had been a defense of his actions rather than an agreement with Vivian's assessment. The idea that he might have helped her solely because of her appearance was disheartening. Still, she couldn't deny that meeting Owen Blackwood again had brightened her day considerably. There was something about him, a quiet strength, an inherent decency that drew her. But she reminded herself sternly that she had just escaped one romantic disaster and was in no position to court another. Her heart had been broken, and she'd learned a harsh lesson about trusting too easily. Now was the time to focus on establishing herself professionally in Silver Creek, not to be distracted by a handsome cowboy, no matter how kind his eyes or how timely his rescue had been. With renewed determination, Thea headed back to the boarding house to prepare for her meeting with Miss Hargrove. Her new life in Silver Creek was just beginning, and she intended to build it on a foundation of independence and self-reliance qualities that would serve her far better than romantic notions. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity as Thea prepared to take over the schoolhouse. Miss Hargrove, a rather rigid woman in her late 30s, proved surprisingly helpful once she determined that Thea was indeed qualified for the position. The students, ranging in age from 6 to 16, regarded their new teacher with cautious curiosity during her observation days. "They're generally well-behaved," Miss Hargrove confided as they walked back to the teacher's cottage one afternoon. "Though the older boys can be challenging when spring fever hits, and do watch out for the Sutton twins, they're clever with their mischief." The teacher's cottage was small but sturdy, with a front room that served as both parlor and kitchen, a bedroom, and a lean-to at the back that housed a washtub and storage. Thea found it charming, particularly the small flower garden that previous teachers had maintained. "I've been quite content here," Miss Hargrove admitted, a softness crossing her usually stern features. "If Matthew hadn't proposed, I might have stayed another decade." "It's perfect," Thea assured her. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." On Sunday, as promised, Mayor Thornton hosted a reception after church services to introduce Thea to the parents of her future students. The townspeople were welcoming, though Thea noticed that Vivian Crawford and her father, a stern-faced man with silver hair, maintained a cool reserve. "Don't mind the Crawfords," Mrs. Porter whispered as they served themselves from the refreshment table. "They think themselves above the rest of us because Mr. Crawford owns the bank." Thea nodded, sipping her lemonade. "Miss Crawford seemed particular when I met her at the general store." "That's a diplomatic way of putting it," Mrs. Porter chuckled. "She's had her cap set for Owen Blackwood for years, though he's shown no interest beyond friendship. I think she views any single woman as competition." Before Thea could respond that she had no designs on Owen, the man himself appeared at her elbow, looking uncommonly formal in a dark suit and string tie. "Miss Matthews," he greeted her, removing his hat. "Congratulations on your new position." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, suddenly conscious of Mrs. Porter's knowing glance between them. "I haven't seen you since that day at the store. Been busy at the ranch. Spring foaling season." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "I've brought something for you, though, a welcome gift." From behind his back, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "Oh, you shouldn't have," Thea protested, though she accepted the gift. "It's nothing grand," he assured her. "Just something practical." Curious, Thea untied the string and unwrapped the paper to reveal a beautiful leather-bound journal with her initials, TM, embossed in gold on the cover. "I noticed you buying stationery," Owen explained. "Thought you might like somewhere to record your thoughts about your new life here." Thea ran her fingers over the smooth leather, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's beautiful, Owen, thank you. You're welcome." He shifted slightly, seeming almost shy for a moment. "I was wondering if you might like to see a bit more of the area before you're consumed with teaching duties. I could show you some of the prettier spots, Settlers Creek, the meadows up in the foothills. They're starting to bloom now." Before Thea could answer, she felt a presence at her other side. "Owen, darling, you promised to speak with Father about the livestock for the Founders' Day celebration," Vivian Crawford said, slipping her hand through the crook of Owen's arm. She glanced at the journal in Thea's hands. "What a charming little gift. Owen, you're always so thoughtful to newcomers." Owen gently but firmly extricated his arm from Vivian's grasp. "I haven't forgotten, Vivian. I'll speak with your father before I leave." He turned back to Thea. "What do you say, Miss Matthews? Perhaps next Saturday if the weather holds." Thea hesitated. The invitation was tempting, but she was conscious of Vivian's narrowed eyes and the whispers that might follow if she were seen riding out alone with Owen Blackwood. "That's very kind, but I'll be moving into the cottage on Saturday," she explained. "Perhaps another time." Was it disappointment she saw flash across his features, If so, he covered it quickly with a nod. Of course. The offer stands whenever you're ready. He replaced his hat. Ladies, if you'll excuse me, I should speak with Mr. Crawford. As Owen moved away, Vivian lingered, her smile not reaching her eyes. Miss Matthews, a word of friendly advice. Silver Creek may seem quaint compared to Philadelphia, but we do observe proper decorum here. A school teacher is held to the highest moral standards. Thea bristled at the implication. I assure you, Miss Crawford, propriety has always been of utmost importance to me. I'm so glad to hear it, Vivian replied with syrupy sweetness. Owen is a dear friend, and he has a tendency to be overly chivalrous. I wouldn't want to see him or you become the subject of unsavory gossip. With that parting shot, Vivian glided away to join her father, leaving Thea feeling both insulted and warned. Don't let her bother you, Mrs. Porter said, having overheard the exchange. Vivian Crawford doesn't own Owen Blackwood, much as she'd like to. I have no interest in Mr. Blackwood beyond friendship, Thea insisted, though even to her own ears the protest sounded hollow. Mrs. Porter patted her arm. Of course, dear. Now come along, Mrs. Sutton is eager to tell you all about her twins' special needs. The rest of the reception passed pleasantly enough, though Thea was conscious of Owen's presence across the room. He caught her eye once and smiled, and she found herself returning the gesture despite her resolve to maintain a professional distance. By the time the 15th of May arrived, Thea had settled into the teacher's cottage and was ready to take full charge of the schoolhouse. Miss Hargrove departed on the morning stage, bound for Arizona territory and her waiting fiancé, leaving Thea with a ring of keys and a ledger full of student names. That first day as Silver Creek's official teacher was both exhilarating and exhausting. The children tested her, as children will with any new authority figure, but Thea's experience in Philadelphia had prepared her well. By the end of the day, she'd established clear expectations, learned all 23 names, and even managed to impress the older students with her knowledge of algebra. As she stood on the schoolhouse steps, watching the last of her pupils disappear down the lane, Thea felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she'd experienced before. This was her school now, her responsibility. For the first time since Henry's betrayal, she felt truly grateful for the turn her life had taken. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. Owen Blackwood rode toward the schoolhouse, leading a second horse, a gentle-looking dapple gray mare. Miss Matthews, he called, drawing to a halt before the steps. How was your first day? Challenging but rewarding, she replied honestly. What brings you this way, Mr. Blackwood? I've come with a proposition, he said, dismounting. This is Daisy. She's the steadiest mare I've ever bred. I thought you might like to borrow her while you're getting established here. The cottage is a fair walk from town, and you might appreciate the independence of having your own transportation. Thea stared at the mare, then at Owen. You want to lend me a horse? Just until you decide whether to buy one of your own, he clarified. No obligation. I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous. Owen shrugged. It's practical, and Daisy needs the exercise. My stable hand spoils her with too many apples and not enough work. Thea approached the mare cautiously, stroking her velvety nose. She's beautiful, but I should warn you my riding skills are rudimentary at best. Daisy won't mind, Owen assured her. She's patient with beginners. Thea hesitated, thinking of Vivian's warning about propriety. But the offer was practical, and turning it down would be foolish out of mere concern for gossip. Thank you, Owen. I accept, on the condition that you let me pay you a fair rental fee. He looked about to protest, then seemed to understand her need for the arrangement to be businesslike. $5 a month then, feed included. Agreed. She extended her hand to seal the deal, and he took it, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Would you like your first lesson now?" he asked, releasing her hand. "I've brought a proper side saddle for you." Thea glanced down at her practical navy dress. "I'm not exactly dressed for riding. You'll manage fine. The schoolyard is flat and empty, perfect for practice." For the next hour, Owen patiently guided Thea through the basics of horsemanship. He was a natural teacher, his instructions clear and his manner encouraging. By the time the sun began to dip toward the western horizon, Thea was confidently walking Daisy in wide circles around the schoolyard. "You're a quick study, Miss Matthews," Owen said approvingly. "A few more lessons and you'll be cantering across the meadows." Thea laughed, exhilarated by her success. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Mr. Blackwood. Walking is ambitious enough for now." He helped her dismount, his hands at her waist steadying her as her feet touched the ground. For a moment they stood close, his hands lingering longer than necessary. Thea felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the exercise. "Thank you for the lesson," she said softly, taking a step back. Owen cleared his throat. "My pleasure, Miss Matthews." He led Daisy to the small stable behind the cottage, showing Thea where to store the saddle and how to properly care for the mare after riding. As they finished settling Daisy with fresh hay and water, Owen leaned against the stable door. "Miss Matthews, Thea, if I may, I meant what I said about showing you some of the countryside. It would be perfectly proper we could make it a group excursion if you're concerned about appearances. Mrs. Porter might join us, or some of your students." Thea considered the offer. "A group outing does sound lovely. Perhaps in a few weeks when I'm more settled with my teaching duties." Owen smiled, clearly pleased that she hadn't rejected the idea outright. "I'll look forward to it." He mounted his horse with practiced ease. "I'll stop by in a few days to see how you and Daisy are getting along." As he rode away, Thea found herself watching until he disappeared around the bend in the road. Despite her determination to focus on her career and avoid romantic entanglements, she couldn't deny the growing attraction she felt toward Owen Blackwood. It wasn't just his handsome face or his kindness, though both were considerable. There was a depth to him, a quiet strength and integrity that reminded her of her father, the highest compliment she could give any man. With a sigh, Thea turned back to her cottage. She had lesson plans to prepare and her own dinner to cook. Thoughts of handsome cowboys would have to wait, no matter how persistently they tried to intrude on her concentration. Spring bloomed fully across the New Mexico territory, painting the usually arid landscape with wildflowers and fresh green growth. As May turned to June, Thea settled into a comfortable routine. Weekdays were devoted to her students, while Saturdays were spent riding Daisy, gradually expanding her territory from the schoolyard to the lanes around Silver Creek. Owen proved true to his word, stopping by every few days to check on Daisy, and Thea suspected on her as well. Their friendship grew naturally, conversations flowing easily between them. She learned that he'd fought for the Confederacy during the war, though he spoke little of that time. He'd come west in '68, working as a ranch hand before saving enough to buy his own land. His horse breeding operation was now one of the most respected in the territory, with Army contracts that ensured steady income. In turn, Thea told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, her years teaching at a girls' academy, and her brief engagement to Henry. She found Owen easy to talk to, a good listener who offered thoughtful responses rather than platitudes. One Saturday afternoon in mid-June, as Thea was working in her small garden, she heard the now familiar sound of Owen's approach. Looking up, she was surprised to see not just Owen but a wagon filled with several of her students and Mrs. Porter. "Good afternoon, Miss Matthews," Owen called cheerfully. "We've come to see if you'd join us for a picnic at Settlers Creek. The weather's perfect, and the children have been asking when you'd see more of our beautiful territory." Thea rose, brushing soil from her hands. "A picnic?" 12-year-old Emma Sutton leaned from the wagon. "Please say yes, Miss Matthews. Mr. Blackwood says there's a swimming hole, and Mama said I could go in if you were there to supervise." Mrs. Porter added her encouragement. "I've packed enough food for an army, dear. Do come along." Thea smiled at Owen, realizing he'd arranged exactly the kind of group outing she'd suggested would be proper. How can I refuse such a delightful invitation? Give me a few minutes to change and saddle Daisy. 20 minutes later, they were on their way, Thea riding Daisy alongside the wagon. The children's excitement was contagious, their chatter and laughter filling the air as they made their way to Settlers Creek, a clear stream that wound through a stand of cottonwood trees about 3 miles from town. The spot Owen had chosen for their picnic was idyllic, a grassy clearing beside a natural pool where the creek widened and slowed. Towering cottonwoods provided dappled shade, and wildflowers dotted the surrounding meadow. "It's beautiful," Thea exclaimed as Owen helped her from her saddle. "One of my favorite places," he admitted. "Peaceful, especially compared to town." The children immediately scattered to explore, with strict instructions from Mrs. Porter to stay within sight and not enter the water until after they'd eaten. Owen spread blankets on the grass while Thea helped Mrs. Porter unpack the impressive array of food: fried chicken, potato salad, freshly baked bread, apple tarts, and a jug of lemonade. As they ate, Owen pointed out landmarks visible from their spot: the distant mountains where he sometimes hunted, the ridge where he'd first spotted Thea at the stage station, the trail that led to his ranch. "You should visit sometime," he said. "See the new foals. I've got a beauty coal black with a perfect white star on his forehead. I'm calling him Midnight Star." "I'd like that," Thea replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. After lunch, the children begged to swim. Thea supervised from the bank, laughing at their antics as they splashed and played in the clear water. Owen joined them, removing his boots and rolling up his trousers to wade in the shallower parts, helping the younger children navigate the gentle current. Watching him with the children, Thea felt a now familiar warmth spread through her chest. He was patient and kind, lifting little Sarah Williams onto his shoulders when she grew tired of swimming, showing Tommy Jenkins how to skip stones across the water's surface. "He's good with them, Mrs. Porter observed, settling beside Thea on the blanket. "Would make a fine father." Thea felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure he would." Mrs. Porter's knowing gaze rested on her face. "You know, dear, there's no shame in finding happiness again after disappointment. The heart heals if we let it." "I'm not sure what you mean," Thea demurred, though of course she did. The older woman patted her hand. "I think you do. Owen Blackwood is a good man, one of the best I've known, and he looks at you the way my late husband used to look at me." Before Thea could respond, Owen called from the creek. "Miss Matthews, you should join us. The water's perfect." "Oh, I couldn't possibly," Thea protested. "I haven't brought anything suitable for swimming." "Not to swim," he clarified, wading toward her. "Just to cool your feet. It's restorative after a hot day." Impulsively, Thea removed her shoes and stockings, carefully setting them aside before rolling up the hem of her skirt a modest few inches. She made her way to the creek's edge, gasping as her toes met the cool water. "Cold," Owen laughed. "You get used to it quickly." He was right. As Thea waded deeper, the water swirling around her ankles, the initial shock gave way to refreshing pleasure. She found a smooth rock to sit on, letting her feet dangle in the current as she watched the children play. The afternoon passed in languid contentment. As the sun began its westward descent, They packed up the remains of their picnic and loaded the now tired children back into the wagon. "Thank you for arranging this," Thea said to Owen as he helped her mount Daisy for the ride home. "It was wonderful." "My pleasure," he replied, his hand lingering on hers as he passed her the reins. "Perhaps we could make it a regular occurrence. There are many more beautiful spots I'd like to show you." Looking into his earnest gray eyes, Thea found herself nodding. "I'd like that very much." As they made their way back to Silver Creek, the children singing around in the wagon behind them, Thea realized that for the first time since arriving in the territory, she felt truly at home. Silver Creek was becoming more than just a place of refuge after Henry's betrayal. It was becoming where she belonged. And Owen Blackwood, she admitted to herself, was becoming far more important to her than she'd ever intended to allow. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Thea's life. Saturday excursions with Owen became a regular occurrence, sometimes with Mrs. Porter and various students, sometimes just the two of them when Owen claimed to be teaching her more advanced riding skills. They explored hidden valleys, climbed rocky outcroppings for spectacular views, and spent long hours talking beneath the shade of ancient juniper trees. July brought scorching heat that made the schoolroom stifling despite open windows and doors. After one particularly uncomfortable day, Thea was grateful to return to her cottage, planning a cool bath before evening fell. She had just filled the washtub when a knock sounded at her door. "Coming," she called, wiping her damp hands on her apron. She opened the door to find Vivian Crawford standing on her porch, a strained smile on her pretty face. "Miss Crawford," Thea said, surprised, "this is unexpected." "I apologize for calling unannounced, Miss Matthews," Vivian replied. "May I come in? I have a matter of some delicacy to discuss." Curious and somewhat wary, Thea stepped aside. "Of course. Please have a seat. Would you care for some lemonade? I've just made a fresh pitcher." "That would be lovely, thank you." Thea busied herself pouring 2 glasses, wondering what could have brought the banker's daughter to her door. They'd had minimal interaction since the reception, with Vivian attending church services but rarely speaking to Thea beyond polite greetings. "Your cottage is charming," Vivian commented, accepting the lemonade. "You've made it quite homey." "Thank you," Thea replied, taking the chair opposite her visitor. "Now, how may I help you, Miss Crawford?" Vivian set her glass down carefully. "I've come out of concern, Miss Matthews, for you and for Owen Blackwood." Thea stiffened slightly. "I'm not sure I understand." "People are talking," Vivian said bluntly, "about the amount of time you and Owen spend together. Your excursions." "Our excursions are perfectly proper," Thea replied, keeping her voice even. "Often chaperoned and always in daylight hours." "Perhaps, but perception matters, especially for a schoolteacher. The school board takes the moral character of our educators very seriously." Vivian leaned forward. "I'm only telling you this as a friend. Theodora, may I call you Theodora?" "I prefer Miss Matthews in this context, if you don't mind." Vivian's lips thinned. "As you wish. Miss Matthews, I've known Owen for years. He's a good man, but he's not the marrying kind. He's made that clear to everyone, including me. I wouldn't want to see you develop expectations that can't be fulfilled." The implication was clear, and Thea felt a flush of anger rise to her cheeks. "I appreciate your concern, Miss Crawford, but I assure you, my friendship with Mr. Blackwood is just that, a friendship. I have no expectations beyond that." Vivian studied her for a moment. "I see. Well, that's reassuring. Still, you might consider being more circumspect, for the sake of your position if nothing else." "Is that a threat, Miss Crawford?" "Goodness, no." Vivian's laugh was brittle. "Simply friendly advice. My father serves on the school board, as you know. He values propriety above all else." The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. Thea rose, signaling the end of the conversation. "Thank you for your concern, Miss Crawford. I'll certainly keep your advice in mind." Vivian stood as well, smoothing her skirts. "I'm glad we had this chat. I'd hate to see Silver Creek lose a competent teacher over something as trivial as gossip." After Vivian departed, Thea sank back into her chair, the pleasure of the afternoon thoroughly disrupted. She knew she'd done nothing improper with Owen, yet Vivian's words had planted a seed of doubt. Was she risking her position? And what had Vivian meant about Owen not being the marrying kind? Her bath forgotten, Thea stepped out onto her porch, breathing in the evening air scented with sage and juniper. In the distance, thunderheads gathered over the mountains, promising a summer storm. She thought of Owen, wondering what he would say about Vivian's visit if she told him. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The next morning after church services, Owen approached her as the congregation dispersed. "Good morning, Miss Matthews," he greeted her, hat in hand. "I was wondering if you might join me for dinner at the hotel restaurant this evening. They're serving a special Sunday roast." Before Thea could answer, she caught sight of Vivian watching them from across the churchyard, her father at her side. Mr. Crawford's disapproving frown was unmistakable. "That's very kind, Mr. Blackwood," Thea replied carefully, "but I'm afraid I have lesson plans to prepare for tomorrow." Disappointment flickered across Owen's face. "Perhaps another time, then." "Yes, perhaps." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "Miss Crawford paid me a visit yesterday." Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes. "I see. Might I walk you home, Miss Matthews? I believe we have matters to discuss." Thea nodded, conscious of the curious glances following them as they left the churchyard together. They walked in silence until they were well away from the church, the dusty street stretching before them in the morning heat. "What did Vivian say?" Owen asked finally, his voice tight. "That people are talking about our friendship, that my position as teacher could be at risk if we continue our excursions." Thea glanced at him. "She also mentioned that you're not the marrying kind, that you've made that clear to everyone, including her." Owen stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of mingled anger and chagrin. "Vivian Crawford has appointed herself the guardian of my intentions for years, despite having no right to do so." "Then it's not true. About you not wanting to marry," his eyes softened as they met hers. "It's true that I told Vivian I had no interest in marrying her, despite her father's not-so-subtle matchmaking. It's not true that I'm opposed to marriage in general." Relief washed through Thea, though she tried not to examine too closely why that mattered so much. "As for people talking," Owen continued, "that's the nature of small towns. But I would never do anything to jeopardize your position, Thea." His use of her first name sent a small thrill through her. "If you'd prefer we not spend time together, no," Thea interrupted, surprising herself with her vehemence. "I enjoy your company, Owen, very much. Perhaps we should be more mindful of appearances." He nodded slowly. "Would it help if I spoke with Mayor Thornton, made my intentions clear?" "Your intentions," Thea echoed, her heart suddenly racing. Owen took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Thea, surely you must know how I feel about you. From the moment I saw you standing alone at that stage station, covered in dust but holding your head high like a queen, I've been drawn to you in a way I can't explain." "Owen," Thea breathed, unable to find more words. "I'm not asking for any declarations from you," he continued quickly. "I know you came here nursing a broken heart, and I respect that you need time. But I want you to know that my interest in you is honorable, and if Vivian or anyone else implies otherwise, they're wrong." Thea looked up into his earnest face, seeing the truth of his words in his clear gray eyes. In that moment, She realized that what she felt for Owen had long since surpassed friendship. The attraction had been there from the beginning, but now there was something deeper: trust, respect, and a growing affection that frightened her with its intensity. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "I care for you too, Owen, more than I expected to, but yes, I do need time." His smile was gentle. "Time you shall have, Miss Matthews, as much as you need." They continued walking toward her cottage, a new understanding between them. When they reached her gate, Owen hesitated. "Would it be too forward to ask if I might call on you properly, with the full knowledge of Mrs. Porter and Mayor Thornton and anyone else who cares to observe?" Thea felt a smile spreading across her face. "I would like that very much, Mr. Blackwood." As Owen tipped his hat and turned to leave, Thea felt lighter than she had in months. Vivian's warning had accomplished the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of driving them apart, it had forced them to acknowledge feelings that might otherwise have remained unspoken for much longer. That evening, as a summer storm finally broke over Silver Creek, bringing welcome rain to the parched earth, Thea sat on her porch watching lightning illuminate the distant mountains. She thought of Owen, of his declaration and her own admission in return. Perhaps, she reflected, being left behind in the dust that day at the stage station hadn't been a tragedy after all, but the beginning of a journey she was only now starting to understand, one that might lead to a happiness greater than anything she dared to imagine when she first set out from Philadelphia. The summer progressed with a new rhythm to Thea's life. Owen called on her formally twice a week, taking her for dinners at the hotel restaurant or for walks along Silver Creek's main street where all could see them. Vivian Crawford and her father observed these developments with obvious disapproval, but Mayor Thornton seemed delighted. "Blackwood's one of our finest citizens," he told Thea after a school board meeting in late July. "Been hoping he'd find himself a good woman to settle down with. Needs someone with education and refinement to balance his frontier roughness." "We're merely courting, Mayor Thornton," Thea reminded him, though the word "merely" hardly encompassed the growing depth of her feelings. Of course," the mayor replied with a knowing smile. "All in good time." Their Saturday excursions continued, though now always with companions, usually Mrs. Porter and some of Thea's students, who were delighted by Owen's knowledge of the territory and his willingness to teach them about native plants and animals. One Saturday in early August, as they prepared for an outing to a nearby mesa, Owen arrived at the boarding house with an unexpected addition to their usual party, a tall, dignified Native American man whom he introduced as Thomas Eagle Feather. "Thomas is my neighbor to the north," Owen explained. "His people have lived on this land for generations. He knows its stories better than anyone." Thomas nodded solemnly to Thea. "Mr. Blackwood speaks highly of you, Miss Matthews. He says you teach the children to respect all cultures." "I try to," Thea replied, "though I'm still learning myself." "That is good. Learning never stops." Thomas's dark eyes held wisdom that made Thea feel young and inexperienced despite her education. Their expedition that day became an unexpected education for all of them, as Thomas guided them to ancient petroglyphs carved into the mesa's walls and explained their significance. The children listened in rapt attention as he told stories of his people's history in the region, of how they had lived in harmony with the harsh land long before European settlers arrived. "The land remembers," he told them, gesturing to the vast expanse visible from the mesa top. "It holds the stories of all who have walked upon it." Later, as they shared a picnic lunch in the shade of a juniper tree, Thea found herself seated between Owen and Thomas. "How did you two become friends?" she asked, curious about the seemingly unlikely relationship between the white rancher and the Native American, Owen exchanged a glance with Thomas. It wasn't an easy start, he admitted. When I first bought my land, there was tension. His cattle strayed onto our traditional hunting grounds, Thomas elaborated. I confronted him. Words were exchanged, some not pleasant. Owen chuckled. Thomas threatened to separate me from my scalp if I didn't control my livestock better. And you? Thea asked, intrigued. I invited him to dinner, Owen replied simply. Figured if we were going to be neighbors, we should at least try to understand each other. Thomas nodded. He listened. Most white men don't listen, but Owen, he heard my concerns, made changes, respected boundaries. And Thomas taught me things about this land I'd never have learned otherwise, Owen added. How to find water in the driest times, which plants can heal, which can kill. Saved my life once when I got caught in a blizzard too far from home. Thea looked between the two men, touched by their friendship that had overcome cultural barriers through mutual respect and understanding. It spoke volumes about Owen's character, she thought, that he had bridged such a divide when many others would have responded with hostility. Will you tell us about the blizzard, Mr. Blackwood? Emma Sutton asked, having overheard the conversation. Soon the entire group was gathered around as Owen and Thomas took turns recounting the harrowing tale of Owen's rescue. Thea watched Owen as he spoke, noting how animated he became when telling stories, how his hands gestured expressively, how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed at his own foolishness for getting caught unprepared. In that moment, with the sun warming her skin and the scent of sage in the air, Thea knew with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with Owen Blackwood. The realization should have frightened her after her experience with Henry, but instead, it filled her with a quiet certainty. This was different. Owen was different, his character proven not by pretty words or promises, but by his actions, his integrity, the respect he commanded from people like Thomas Eagle Feather and Mrs. Porter. As if sensing her thoughts, Owen glanced her way, their eyes meeting over the heads of the children. The warmth in his gaze made her heart skip a beat, and she offered him a small, private smile in return. The following week brought unexpected news. Mayor Thornton stopped by the schoolhouse after classes ended, his expression unusually somber. Miss Matthews, I'm afraid I have some difficult information to share, he began once they were seated in her small office. It seems your former fiancé, Mr. Henry Caldwell, has been inquiring about your whereabouts. Thea felt the blood drain from her face. Henry? But why? How? He apparently arrived in Santa Fe some weeks ago and discovered you had never arrived. He's been tracing the stagecoach route backward, asking questions. Yesterday, he telegraphed our Western Union office asking if a Miss Theodora Matthews was employed here. What did you tell him? Thea asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nothing yet. The telegram operator, young Billy Stevens, came to me instead of responding directly. He knew something of your situation from town talk. The mayor leaned forward. Miss Matthews, if this man abandoned you at a stage station, he has no claim on you now. You needn't see him if he comes here. Thank you, Mayor Thornton. Thea took a steadying breath. If he does come to Silver Creek, I would appreciate being forewarned. Of course, my dear. I'll make sure Billy knows to alert me immediately if another telegram arrives. After the mayor left, Thea sat at her desk, her mind whirling with questions. Why would Henry be looking for her now? What could he possibly want after the cruel way he discarded her? She debated whether to tell Owen about this development. Their relationship, though still in its early stages, had deepened over the summer months. They had not yet spoken of love explicitly, but it was there in every glance, every conversation, every careful touch of his hand to hers when he helped her into a saddle or over a rocky path. The decision was made for her when Owen appeared at her cottage that evening, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand and concern in his eyes. "Mayor Thornton told me about the telegram," he said without preamble. "Are you all right?" Thea accepted the flowers, gesturing for him to enter. "I'm more bewildered than anything else. I can't imagine why Henry would be looking for me now." Owen's expression darkened. "I can think of a few reasons, none of them good. Such as, perhaps his new situation in Santa Fe didn't work out as planned. Or he's discovered that being alone in a new territory isn't as advantageous as having a respectable wife by his side." Owen paced the small confines of her parlor. Men like that who discard people when it's convenient often expect to be able to reclaim them just as easily. "I'm not a possession to be reclaimed," Thea said firmly. "Whatever Henry wants, he won't find me willing to forget what he did." Owen stopped pacing, turning to face her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Thea, I need you to know something. If Caldwell comes to Silver Creek, you won't face him alone. I'll be beside you if you want me there." "I do," she admitted softly. "Want you there, that is." He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "There's something else I need to say, something I've been waiting to tell you until I felt you were ready to hear it." Thea's heart raced. "Yes, I love you, Theodora Matthews." The words were simple, direct, utterly sincere. "I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood in the dust with your head held high, refusing to be broken by betrayal. I love your courage, your kindness, your determination. I love how you've made a place for yourself here, how you've opened your heart to this land and its people." Tears filled Thea's eyes, not of sadness but of a joy so complete it overwhelmed her. "Owen, you don't need to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I know it might be too soon, that you might need more time. I love you too," she interrupted, the words bursting from her heart. "I think I've known it for weeks, but I was afraid to trust my feelings after being so wrong about Henry." Owen's face lit with such happiness that Thea felt her own heart might burst from the beauty of it. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he drew her into his arms. "May I kiss you, Thea?" he whispered, his face inches from hers. "Please," she breathed. His lips met hers with exquisite gentleness, a kiss that spoke of reverence and promise. Thea's hands moved to his shoulders, steadying herself as her knees threatened to weaken at the tenderness of his touch. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens with Henry Caldwell," he murmured, "know that you are deeply loved, not just by me but by this whole community that's come to respect you." "Thank you," Thea whispered, feeling safer and more cherished than she ever had before. "That means everything." They spent the evening talking quietly on her porch swing, making tentative plans for the future while watching the stars emerge in the vast New Mexico sky. When Owen finally left with a last gentle kiss, Thea felt a curious sense of peace. Whatever Henry's reasons for seeking her out, she was no longer the same woman he had abandoned 3 months ago. She was stronger now, more certain of herself and her place in the world. And she was loved truly, honestly loved by a man whose character had been proven not through words but through consistent actions and the respect of those who knew him best. The first cool breath of autumn was in the air when Henry Caldwell finally arrived in Silver Creek. September had brought harvest festivals and preparations for the new school term, and Thea had almost convinced herself that Henry had given up his search. Then, on a crisp Thursday afternoon, as her students were filing out of the schoolhouse, a rented buggy pulled up outside. Thea froze in the doorway as a familiar figure stepped down, tall, fair-haired, impeccably dressed in an Eastern suit that looked absurdly out of place in the dusty street. "Theodora," Henry called, his voice carrying the cultured accent that had once impressed her. "My darling, I've found you at last." The children looked curiously between their teacher and the strange man approaching the schoolhouse steps. Thea straightened her spine, summoning every ounce of composure. "Children, you're dismissed for the day. Please go directly home." The students scattered, though a few lingered at a distance, watching with undisguised interest. Henry climbed the steps, his handsome face arranged in an expression of contrition that Thea now recognized as completely artificial. "Henry," she acknowledged coolly, "this is unexpected. Is it?" He smiled, the charming smile that had once made her heart flutter. Now she saw only calculation behind it. "Surely you knew I would come for you once I realized my terrible mistake." "The only mistake was my believing your promises," Thea replied, keeping her voice even. "Please leave, Henry." "There's nothing for you here." His smile faltered, then returned with increased brilliance. "Now, darling, don't be hasty. I understand you're angry, you have every right to be. What I did was unforgivable, but I've come to make amends, to take you back to Santa Fe as my wife. The house is ready, the business is thriving, everything I promised you." "Except fidelity and basic human decency," Thea observed. Henry had the grace to look abashed. "That woman in Santa Fe, it was nothing, a momentary weakness. I've sent her away. It's you I want, Theodora, it's always been you." "How fortunate for me that I discovered your true nature before we were married," Thea said, her tone glacial. "Goodbye, Henry." She turned to go back into the schoolhouse, but Henry caught her arm. "Don't be a fool, Theodora. What do you think you're doing here? Playing schoolmarm in this backwater town. You were meant for better things, for civilization, for the life I can give you. Remove your hand from Miss Matthews." The quiet command came from behind them. Thea turned to see Owen standing at the bottom of the steps, his expression dangerously calm. Thomas Eagle Feather stood beside him, his presence equally imposing. Henry's grip loosened in surprise, and Thea pulled free, moving instinctively toward Owen. "And who might you be?" Henry demanded, his voice dripping with disdain as he took in Owen's work clothes and weathered appearance. "Owen Blackwood, the man who found Miss Matthews after you abandoned her at a stage station." Owen's voice remained steady, but Thea could see the tension in his jaw, the controlled anger in his stance. Henry's gaze flickered between them, comprehension dawning. "I see. You found yourself a protector, Theodora. How resourceful of you." "Mr. Blackwood is more than my protector, Henry. He's the man I intend to marry." The words left Thea's lips before she'd consciously decided to speak them. Owen's eyes widened briefly before a slow smile spread across his face, not of triumph, but of quiet joy. Henry's handsome features contorted with disbelief. "Marry this cowboy? Have you lost your mind, Theodora? Look at him. He's barely civilized." Thomas Eagle Feather made a sound suspiciously like a snort of amusement. "If this is civilization," he remarked, gesturing to Henry's dusty but expensive suit, "I prefer the alternative." By now, a small crowd had gathered at a discreet distance. Mayor Thornton, Mrs. Porter, several townspeople who had been passing by. Thea was conscious of their presence but focused entirely on the confrontation before her. "Henry, I'm asking you politely to leave," she said firmly. "My life is here now. I'm happy, happier than I ever was in Philadelphia, certainly happier than I would have been with you." "You can't be serious," Henry protested. "This place is nothing. These people are nothing." "That's where you're wrong," Owen said, climbing the steps to stand beside Thea. "Silver Creek may be small, but it's a community of good people who look out for each other, who welcomed Thea and recognized her worth from the moment she arrived." He turned to Thea, taking her hand. "Did you mean what you said about intending to marry me?" Thea's heart swelled as she met his earnest gaze. "With all my heart, yes, though I'd imagined a more private proposal." Owen grinned. I'm flexible about the details as long as the answer is yes. Henry made a sound of disgust. This is absurd. Theodora, I'm offering you a life of comfort and social standing. Think about what you're throwing away. I know exactly what I'm choosing, Thea replied, not taking her eyes from Owen's face, and who I'm choosing. Mayor Thornton stepped forward from the gathered crowd. Mr. Caldwell, I believe Miss Matthews has made her position clear. I suggest you return to Santa Fe. Alone. Henry looked around at the assembled townspeople, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. His shoulders sagged as he realized he had lost. You'll regret this, Theodora, he said, but the words lacked conviction. When the novelty of playing pioneer wears off, you'll wish you'd made a different choice. I don't think so, Henry. Thea's voice held certainty. I wish you well, but my future lies here. With a final look of disbelief, Henry descended the steps, climbed back into his rented buggy and drove away, a cloud of dust marking his departure. As the crowd began to disperse, Owen turned to Thea. I had planned to ask you properly with a ring at sunset by the creek where we had our first picnic. Thea laughed, the tension of the confrontation dissolving in the joy of the moment. I'm sorry I spoiled your plans. Don't be. I much prefer your way. His eyes grew serious. Thea, I promise you a life of love and respect. I can't offer mansions or fancy parties, but I can offer a true partnership, a home filled with warmth, and my whole heart for as long as I live. That's all I could ever want, Thea whispered, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. Owen cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. Then, Theodora Matthews, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes, with all my heart. Their kiss, witnessed by the remaining townspeople and sealed with cheers and applause, felt like a homecoming, like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place, completing a picture more beautiful than Thea had ever imagined for herself. As Owen's arms encircled her, strong and steady, Thea thought of that dusty day at the stage station, of the devastation she had felt watching the stagecoach disappear with her former dreams. How strange and wonderful that what had seemed like an ending had actually been the beginning of a far greater journey, one that had led her not just to a place, but to a love worth keeping. The wedding of Owen Blackwood and Theodora Matthews took place on a perfect October afternoon, with the cottonwoods along Settlers Creek turning gold against the brilliant blue sky. The entire town of Silver Creek turned out for the occasion, the ceremony held in the small church, followed by a celebration that spilled onto the main street with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the county. Mayor Thornton officiated, beaming with satisfaction at the union he felt personally responsible for encouraging. Mrs. Porter cried openly throughout the ceremony, while Thomas Eagle Feather presented the couple with a beautifully crafted medicine pouch containing sacred herbs to protect your union through all seasons. Thea wore a simple gown of ivory silk that Mrs. Porter and the town seamstress had worked on secretly for weeks. Owen, looking somewhat uncomfortable but undeniably handsome in a new black suit, couldn't take his eyes off his bride as she walked down the aisle toward him on the arm of Mr. Jenkins, who had volunteered to give her away. Never seen Blackwood look so thunderstruck, Mr. Williams whispered to his wife as Thea passed their pew. Like he can't believe his good fortune. Indeed, Owen's expression as he took Thea's hand before the altar was one of wonder and profound gratitude. When they exchanged their vows, his voice was steady but thick with emotion. I, Owen James Blackwood, take you, Theodora Elizabeth Matthews, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you all the days of my life, to protect and provide for you, to be faithful to you alone, and to build a life of joy and purpose by your side. What began when I found you in the dust shall continue until death parts us, and my love for you shall never waver." Thea's answering vows, spoken through happy tears, echoed his promises and added her own. "I will stand with you through all of life's trials, find strength in your steadiness, and bring light to your darkest days. You offered me more than a ride that day. You offered me a future I could not have imagined, and I will spend my life grateful for the journey we now share." When Mayor Thornton pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up nearly rattled the church windows. Owen's kiss, though mindful of their audience, held such tenderness that several more handkerchiefs appeared among the wedding guests. The celebration continued well into the evening, with lanterns strung across the main street and a platform erected for dancing. Owen, who had admitted to having 2 left feet, nevertheless waltzed with his bride to the strains of a fiddle and piano, their movements as harmonious as their hearts. "Happy Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured as they turned beneath the starlit sky. "Completely, Mr. Blackwood," Thea replied, savoring the new name that felt so right. "Though I must confess, I'm rather looking forward to the moment we can slip away from our own celebration." Owen's eyes darkened. "That makes 2 of us." As tradition dictated, they were eventually sent off with good-natured teasing and a shower of rice, climbing into Owen's wagon for the journey to their new home. Owen had spent the past 2 months preparing his ranch house for Thea's arrival, adding a proper kitchen, glass windows, and a small library where she could continue her studies and prepare her lessons, as she intended to continue teaching at least until they started a family. The ranch house, nestled in a protected valley with mountains rising behind it and a creek flowing nearby, welcomed them with windows glowing with lamplight, Thomas Eagle Feather having ridden ahead to ensure all was ready for the newlyweds' arrival. Owen lifted Thea from the wagon and carried her across the threshold, setting her gently on her feet in the main room, where a fire crackled welcomingly in the stone hearth. "Welcome home, Thea," he said softly, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Thea turned slowly, taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings. The bookshelves Owen had built to house her collection, the colorful quilts that softened the rustic space. It was nothing like the grand house in Santa Fe that Henry had promised, but it was infinitely more precious, a home built with love and consideration for her happiness. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning back to her husband. "Everything I could have wished for." Owen drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss far less restrained than the one they had shared in the church. Thea responded with equal fervor, her arms twining around his neck as the kiss deepened, filled with the promise of the night to come. Later, as they lay entwined in the large bed that dominated their bedroom, Thea rested her head on Owen's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his fingers playing idly with her unbound hair that spilled across the quilt. "That sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best," she replied thoughtfully. "If Henry hadn't abandoned me, I would never have found you, never discovered this life that feels so much more authentic than anything I knew in Philadelphia." Owen's arm tightened around her. "I thank God every day that I happened to be riding past that stage station at that exact moment, though I suspect I would have found you eventually, Thea Blackwood. Some things are meant to be." "Is that so?" Thea propped herself up on one elbow, smiling down at her husband. "The hardened frontiersman believes in destiny." "I believe in this," he said simply, pulling her down for another kiss that spoke more eloquently than words of the love they shared. 5 years later, on a warm spring afternoon, Thea stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching as Owen led their 3-year-old daughter Sarah on her first pony ride around the corral. The little girl's delighted laughter carried on the breeze, her honey-brown curls so like her mother's bouncing with each careful step of the gentle pony. "Look, Mama, I'm riding," Sarah called, her face alight with pride. "I see you, darling. You're doing beautifully." Thea called back, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their second child, a boy, according to Thomas Eagle Feather's confident prediction, would arrive before the summer solstice. The Blackwood Ranch had prospered in the years since their marriage. Owen's reputation as a horse breeder had grown, bringing contracts not just from the Army but from wealthy ranchers throughout the territory. Thea had continued teaching until Sarah's birth, and now tutored several local children who lived too far from town to attend the schoolhouse regularly. Silver Creek had grown as well, with a proper hotel replacing the old boarding house, though Mrs. Porter still ran it with her trademark efficiency. A new church, and even a small newspaper that proudly reported on the achievements of our esteemed citizens Mr. and Mrs. Owen Blackwood, with gratifying regularity. Thomas Eagle Feather remained their closest neighbor and friend, teaching Sarah words in his native language and bringing gifts of beautifully crafted moccasins and small wooden animals for the child he treated as a niece. His people and the settlers of Silver Creek had achieved an uneasy peace, due in no small part to Owen's efforts at fostering understanding between the communities. Life wasn't always easy. Droughts, harsh winters, and the occasional outlaw passing through the territory presented challenges that required resilience and community cooperation to overcome. But through it all, the love between Owen and Thea had only deepened, weathering each storm and celebrating each joy with equal commitment. As Owen lifted Sarah from the pony and set her on his shoulders for the walk back to the house, Thea thought again of that day at the stage station of dust and betrayal, and the crushing feeling that her life had derailed beyond repair. How wrong she had been, how fortunate in her misfortune. Owen climbed the porch steps, setting Sarah down to run to her mother. "Did you see me, Mama? Did you see me riding?" "I did, my brave girl," Thea assured her, bending as much as her condition allowed to embrace her daughter. "You're going to be an excellent horsewoman just like your father." Owen's arm slipped around her waist, his hand spreading protectively over her rounded belly. "How are you feeling? Not too tired from standing so long?" "I'm perfectly fine," Thea assured him, leaning into his solid warmth. "Happy, in fact. Only perfectly fine and happy." Owen teased, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I must be falling short in my husbandly duties if that's the best I can inspire." Thea turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him properly despite Sarah's giggled "Ewa" at her parents' display of affection. "Blissfully, completely, overwhelmingly content," she amended when they parted. "Is that better, Mr. Blackwood?" Owen's smile, still as heart-stopping as it had been the day they met, was answer enough. "Much better, Mrs. Blackwood. Though I intend to spend the rest of our lives ensuring that contentment never fades into mere happiness." As they went inside together, their daughter dancing ahead of them and their son making his presence known with a series of strong kicks, Thea reflected that being left behind in the dust that day had been the first step on a journey more beautiful than any she could have planned. Owen had indeed offered her more than a ride. He had offered her a life filled with purpose, passion, and a love that continued to deepen with each passing day. It wasn't the life she had imagined when she left Philadelphia, but it was infinitely better, richer, truer, and built on the solid foundation of a love that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a dusty New Mexico afternoon.